They say alphas are born to lead, to dominate, to command, to roar until the world kneels. I was born soft. That's what my family always said, softly enough to sting. Too gentle, too trusting, too quiet. An alpha who prefers peace to control, who apologizes even when he's right. An embarrassment to the Whitmore name. But Lance never made me feel like I was lacking. Or at least, that's what I thought. He said he liked that I was different. That I wasn't like the arrogant men who strutted through high society, pretending they owned the air everyone breathed. He said I was kind, thoughtful, a rare kind of alpha. And I believed him. Because when you're constantly told you're not enough, the first person who says you are becomes your entire world. That morning, the sun filtered through the tall windows of the Whitmore estate, warm and golden. I should have felt happy. It was supposed to be one of the best days of my life. The day before our engagement ceremony. The ballroom downstairs was already being decorated. White lilies, silver tablecloths, soft jazz humming from the speakers. Everything looked perfect. Almost perfect. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my tie. The new cufflinks sat in a small velvet box on my palm. Simple, elegant, engraved with the initials J and L. I'd spent hours picking them out. A gift for Lance, something to mark the moment we'd promise forever. I smiled to myself, nervous but excited. For once, I thought maybe I was doing something right. Lance had asked me to come by his study that morning to review the final guest list together. His tone on the phone had been affectionate, teasing. "Don't be late, love. You know how your mother glares when we disagree in public." So I went, cufflink box in hand, heart stupidly full. The door was slightly ajar when I arrived. I raised my hand to knock, but then I froze. Lance's voice drifted through the gap, sharp and amused. "Of course I don't love him. What kind of idiot do you take me for?" My breath caught. There was laughter. Not just his, another voice, familiar and male. Maybe one of his friends from the golf club. I pressed closer, my fingers gripping the doorframe. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. "I mean, come on," Lance continued, chuckling. "You think I'd be marrying Jace Whitmore if it weren't for what comes with him? The Whitmore fortune practically falls into my lap once the papers are signed. The guy's too naive to notice anything." A sick, hollow feeling bloomed in my chest. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. My mind tried to tell me I'd misheard. That maybe he was joking, teasing. But the next words tore that hope apart. "He's perfect for it, really. Sweet, obedient, and desperate to be loved. All I have to do is smile, and he folds." There was a pause. Then laughter. I think that was the moment something inside me cracked. Quietly, like glass under pressure. I don't remember how long I stood there. Seconds? Minutes? The air in the hallway felt heavy, thick. My hand trembled around the gift box. I stepped back, my shoes making no sound against the carpet. The cufflinks felt like lead. For a moment, I thought of bursting in, demanding an explanation. But what was there to explain? The man I loved wasn't who I thought he was. He didn't love me. He was using me. By the time I reached my car, my chest was tight, but no tears came. It wasn't sadness yet, it was shock. A kind of cold numbness that spread through my veins until I couldn't tell what hurt more. His words, or the fact that I believed every lie he ever told me. When I finally looked down, I realized I was still holding the cufflink box. I opened it, staring at the engraved letters, J and L. A symbol of love that never really existed. I threw it onto the passenger seat and drove. That evening, the engagement party began as planned. The Whitmore ballroom glittered. Chandeliers dripping with light, champagne flowing, and cameras flashing as guests arrived in designer suits and diamonds. My mother smiled through clenched teeth, whispering about family image and public expectations. Everyone thought this night was about love. Only I knew it was about ending it. Lance looked stunning, of course. He always did. Dark hair slicked back, expensive cologne clinging to him, charm oozing from every word as he mingled with our guests. When he turned and saw me enter, his face lit up with that practiced smile I used to melt for. "Jace," he said, taking my hand. "You look." "Don't." My voice came out steadier than I expected. The music was soft, the chatter loud, but I saw confusion flicker across his expression. Then concern. Then that same subtle calculation he always wore when he was trying to control the narrative. "Is something wrong?" he whispered, leaning closer. I looked at him, really looked. The man everyone thought was perfect. The man I thought loved me. And suddenly, I saw it. The lies behind the smile, the ambition behind the tenderness. I stepped back, heart pounding. Then, before I could lose my nerve, I said it, loud enough for everyone to hear. There's no engagement. The room fell silent. Heads turned. My mother's champagne glass froze midair. Lance blinked, confusion flashing into panic. What? I didn't flinch. You heard me. It's over. There's not going to be a wedding. Not now. Not ever. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone gasped. Lance's face twisted, the perfect mask cracking. Jace, what are you talking about? Don't lie, I said softly. Not again. And before he could reach for me, before I could break down in front of everyone, I turned and walked out. I didn't know where I was driving. I just knew I couldn't go home. Every streetlight blurred, my reflection in the window a stranger, a fool in an expensive suit, stripped of everything except the ache in his chest. Eventually, I stopped in front of the Velvet Room, an exclusive, high-end bar known for its privacy. A place where society's elite went to forget their sins behind locked VIP doors. I walked in without a reservation. The hostess recognized my name instantly, and didn't dare stop me. Inside, the air was thick with low music and the scent of aged whiskey. Golden light glowed over black marble tables and crimson velvet chairs. Couples whispered, deals were struck, and somewhere in the corner, someone laughed too loudly. I sat at the bar, loosened my tie, and told the bartender, something strong. And keep them coming. By the fourth drink, my anger had turned to despair. By the sixth, despair turned into a numb, heavy haze. I wasn't thinking clearly anymore, just fragments of pain looping through my mind. He never loved you. You were a tool. You're too soft, too trusting, too. Rough night. The voice was calm, smooth. It cut through the fog like silk through smoke. I turned my head and froze. The man sitting beside me was unlike anyone else in the room. Dark hair slicked back neatly, eyes like liquid steel under the dim light, posture straight but effortless. He wore a simple black suit, nothing ostentatious, yet somehow he radiated quiet authority. An Omega. I could tell from the subtle scent, cool, controlled, and expensive, but not the kind who bowed his head to alphas. He looked at me the way people look at problems they're deciding whether to solve or ignore. I huffed a bitter laugh. You could say that. He arched a brow slightly. You're drinking like you lost something important. Yeah, I muttered, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. My pride. My patience. Maybe my mind. He didn't respond. Just studied me quietly, like he already knew everything without needing to ask. Something about that steady gaze made me want to keep talking. Maybe because he didn't pity me. Maybe because he wasn't impressed by my name. You ever get so tired, I slurred softly, that you want to throw everything away? Name, title, expectations, all of it. He tilted his glass slightly. Every day. That made me laugh, a rough, cracked sound that turned into a sigh. You're honest. I like that. Most people don't, he said simply. I looked at him again, really looked. Perfectly calm. Perfectly unbothered. Beautiful, in a quiet, dangerous way. Maybe it was the alcohol. Maybe it was heartbreak. Maybe it was both. But the next words left my mouth before I could stop them. Marry me. The man stilled, his fingers pausing on the glass. Excuse me? I leaned forward, drunk courage spilling out of me. You heard me. I'll pay you. Whatever you want. Just marry me. He blinked slowly, expression unreadable. You're drunk. Probably, I admitted, with a humorless smile. But I mean it. And why, he asked evenly, would I marry a stranger who smells like heartbreak and whiskey? Because, I said, my voice dropping, I need someone who won't lie to me for money. Someone who doesn't care who I am. His eyes flicked over me, sharp, assessing, like he was peeling back layers no one else could see. What makes you think I'd fit that? Because you don't look like you need anything from anyone. For a moment, silence stretched between us. The bar around us faded, just his gaze, steady and piercing. Then, finally, he said, if I say yes, you won't remember this tomorrow. Then marry me again tomorrow, I whispered. A hint of amusement, or maybe curiosity, flickered in his eyes. You're reckless. I gave a tired smile. I'm free-falling. Might as well make it interesting. He stared at me for a long moment. Then quietly he said, fine. I blinked. Fine. He nodded once. I'll marry you. Before I could process what was happening, he signaled the bartender, who made a call. Within minutes, a private room was arranged, complete with a legal officiant, something only the most powerful could summon at midnight. We signed papers. My name came out shaky. His precise. When I finally looked down, I saw it written clearly, Cale Arden. The name tugged at something in my hazy mind, like I'd heard it before. But before I could think, Cale rose from his chair. He buttoned his suit jacket, looked at me, and said in a voice that felt like steel wrapped in velvet, "Since you've chosen me, Jace Whitmore, you're mine now. And I protect what's mine." Then he left. I sat there, staring at the ring on my finger, a cheap stand-in from the bar's service drawer, but it gleamed under the light like a promise I didn't understand. Somewhere behind me, the city pulsed, bright, alive, oblivious. And me? I was drunk, heartbroken, and somehow married. To a stranger whose name still echoed in my head like thunder. Cale Arden. I didn't know yet that I'd just tied myself to the most powerful Omega in the country. All I knew was that for the first time in my life, I'd made a decision no one could control. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of everything. The first thing I felt when I woke up wasn't sunlight. It was pain. A pounding headache throbbed right behind my eyes, the kind that made me regret every life decision leading up to it. The second thing I noticed was that I wasn't in my car, or my bedroom. I was in a hotel suite. A very expensive one. Silk sheets, blackout curtains, the faint smell of cologne that wasn't mine. The scent was clean, sharp, and powerful. Omega, but not soft. It carried weight. Authority. I groaned and sat up, clutching my temples. My suit jacket lay folded neatly on a chair, my tie draped beside it. There was a glass of water and painkillers on the nightstand. Someone had thought ahead. I took them automatically, trying to piece together the fragments of last night. Lance. The bar. The stranger with eyes like ice and a voice that could quiet a storm. And then, I froze. On my left hand, under the morning light, a ring gleamed. Not the custom platinum, one my mother had ordered for the engagement I'd just destroyed. This was simple gold, unpolished, slightly too big. The kind of thing you picked in a hurry. Memories flickered, a signature on a paper. A quiet voice saying, "Since you've chosen me, you're mine now." "Oh no," I whispered. "Oh hell no." A knock at the door nearly made me jump. "Come in," I croaked. The door opened, and a hotel attendant stepped in. A young woman in a sleek uniform. She bowed slightly. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore. Mr. Arden asked that breakfast be brought up for you. He said you might need it." My mouth went dry. "Mr. Who?" "Arden," she repeated, politely confused. "Your husband, sir." "Husband?" I almost choked. "Wait, he's here." The attendant hesitated. "He left earlier for a meeting, but he instructed that you be taken care of." Taken care of. The words shouldn't have sounded comforting, but somehow they did. I rubbed a hand over my face. "Right. Of course. Thank you." When she left, I sat back on the bed, staring at the ring again. What did I do? I reached for my phone, dead. I plugged it in and waited. The moment it powered up, it exploded with notifications. Dozens of missed calls. Hundreds of messages. And then the headlines. Breaking. Untouchable Omega CEO of Arrivo's Corp secretly married to a Whitmore Alpha. Cale Arden, the legendary Omega tycoon, ties the knot in mystery midnight ceremony. Jace Whitmore cancels engagement. Marries billionaire Omega hours later. My blood ran cold. Cale Arden. I'd heard the name before. Everyone had. He was the youngest CEO to take over Arrivo's corporation, the empire that dominated tech, defense, and private security. An Omega who rose to power in a world that chewed Omegas alive. Feared by rivals. Respected by alphas. Untouchable. And I'd married him. My phone buzzed again, this time my mother. "Jace Whitmore," she screamed the moment I answered. "Do you realize what you've done?" "Good morning to you too," I muttered. "Don't you dare joke. The entire family is in crisis. Your father nearly had a heart attack. You married Cale Arden, the most dangerous man in the country. Do you even know who he is?" "I'm starting to get an idea," I said weakly. "He's an Omega who ruined 3 rival families last year just because they tried to merge without his consent. Jace, you cannot stay married to him." I didn't plan to stay married at all. I snapped, rubbing my temples. "I was drunk, Mother. I didn't even know who he was." There was a pause. Then her voice softened, terrified. "You need to fix this. Immediately. Before he decides he wants something from us." But before I could respond, another call came in. Unknown number. I switched lines automatically. "Mr. Whitmore," a smooth, unfamiliar voice said. "This is David, Mr. Arden's assistant. He's requested your presence at his residence this afternoon." "What?" "You'll be picked up in 1 hour. Please be ready." Then the line went dead. I stared at my phone. What just happened? Exactly 1 hour later, a black car, sleek, tinted and intimidating, pulled up in front of the hotel. The driver, in a dark suit, opened the door with silent precision. "Mr. Whitmore," he said. "Mr. Arden is expecting you." I hesitated. My instincts screamed that walking into Cale Arden's world was like stepping into a lion's den. But technically, I was already married to the lion. So I climbed in. The drive was quiet, the city blurring past the windows. My pulse wouldn't settle. When the car finally stopped, we were in front of a modern glass mansion overlooking the coast. The kind of place that looked like it belonged on the cover of Architects of Power. Security guards stood discreetly along the driveway, earpieces glinting. The driver led me to the entrance, where double doors opened automatically. The interior was minimalist, steel, marble and glass. Cold, immaculate, and expensive. And in the middle of it all, Cale Arden stood by a floor-to-ceiling window, sunlight spilling over him like he owned it. He turned slightly when I entered. His presence was unnerving. Calm, but commanding. Every movement deliberate, every glance measured. "Mr. Whitmore," he greeted, voice smooth and deep. "You're awake." "Apparently," I muttered. "You could have told me you were Cale Arden." He arched an eyebrow. "You didn't ask." "I was drunk." "Then perhaps you should drink less." I blinked, incredulous. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" A faint curve touched his lips. Barely a smile, more like a private joke. "You proposed." I merely accepted. My face heated. "I offered to pay you. You could have said no." "I could have," he agreed. "But I didn't." "Why?" He looked at me for a long moment, then said simply, "Because you looked like someone who needed saving from himself." That silenced me. Cale walked closer, his footsteps quiet against the marble. He was taller than I remembered, his gaze sharp but strangely gentle. "You regret it," he said calmly. "Wouldn't you?" I shot back. "I woke up married to a stranger who happens to be one of the most powerful people in the country. My family's panicking, the media's on fire, and I don't even know what this," I gestured vaguely between us, "means." Cale studied me like he was evaluating a business proposal. "It means you're my husband." I choked. That's not funny. "I'm not joking." He tilted his head slightly. "You signed the papers." "So did I. It's legal." I ran a hand through my hair. "We can annul it." "I'll call a lawyer." "I already did," he interrupted, voice calm. "It can be annulled, yes. But that would require a public statement from both of us. And I'm not interested in seeing your name dragged through the media again. You've had enough of that." I frowned. "Why do you care?" "Because you're mine," he said simply. "And I protect what's mine." The way he said it, low, firm, certain, made something in my chest tighten. It wasn't dominance in the usual alpha sense. It was quieter, unshakable. "Cale," I began, but he stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the faint warmth of his breath. "Do you want out?" he asked softly. "Truly?" I swallowed hard. My head said yes. But for some reason, my voice hesitated. I don't know. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. "Then stay. For now." He turned away, walking back toward the window. "You'll move in here. It'll keep the press calm, and it'll make the story consistent. I'll have a room prepared for you." "Wait, move in." I sputtered. "You're serious?" "Completely. You expect me to just pack up and live here?" He looked back at me, eyes steady. "You're my husband, Jace. People will notice if you don't." I opened my mouth to argue, but his tone, that quiet finality, left no room for it. Cale Arden wasn't a man people said no to. Later, as I stood in the guest room, if you could call a space with a view of the ocean and a personal balcony a guest room, I tried to process the last 24 hours. I'd gone from being the humiliated ex-fiancé of a gold digger to the legally wedded husband of the most powerful Omega in the country. And somehow, Cale didn't seem angry, or opportunistic, or even interested in what he could gain. If anything, he seemed protective, almost gentle, beneath the steel. When dinner arrived, we ate in near silence. He didn't ask about Lance. He didn't ask why I did it. He just said, "You'll stay as long as you want. No one touches you without my permission. No one touches me." I didn't know whether to laugh or shiver. That night, lying in the massive bed in a room that wasn't mine, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. Cale Arden, the untouchable Omega, my accidental husband. I barely knew him, yet he'd taken control of the chaos I'd created without hesitation. He didn't demand anything, didn't push, just existed with this quiet authority that both intimidated and steadied me. Maybe I should have been scared. Maybe I was. But underneath that fear was something else. Curiosity. Because when Cale looked at me, like I wasn't weak, like I wasn't a joke of an alpha. It made something inside me shift. For the first time, I wasn't sure who was saving whom. And as sleep pulled me under, I couldn't shake the sound of his voice from my head. Steady, calm, and terrifyingly sincere. Since you've chosen me, you're mine now. I protect what's mine. Living with Kale Arden is like living beside a storm. One that never shouts, never flashes, but can level a world with a whisper. Every corner of his mansion hums with quiet control. The air itself feels disciplined. No noise, no chaos, no hint of anything that isn't deliberate. The first few mornings, I moved through it like an intruder, afraid to breathe too loudly. Kale never raised his voice. He didn't need to. He simply looked, and the world obeyed. At breakfast, the house staff would stand straighter when he entered. Business calls were short, efficient, lethal. He'd sit with his tablet, skimming through million-dollar proposals while drinking black coffee, posture flawless, eyes half-lidded with focus. Are they always that scared of you? I asked once, watching his secretary flinch when Kale simply said, "No sugar." He glanced at me, unbothered. They're not scared. They're disciplined. Looks like fear to me. Fear, he said, stirring his coffee, is a kind of respect. The most reliable kind. I didn't know what to say to that. Kale fascinated me, because everything about him broke the rules I'd grown up believing. Omegas were supposed to be soft, submissive, needing protection. But Kale didn't need anyone. He was calm and cold, but underneath that stillness was power, refined, precise, impossible to look away from. And somehow, even though he could have used that power to control me, he didn't. When we were alone, something in him shifted. His voice softened, his eyes warmed. Sometimes, when I passed him in the hallway, his hand would brush mine lightly, a fleeting touch that sent heat crawling up my neck. Once, he caught me staring at him after dinner. "What is it?" he asked without looking up. "Just wondering how you do it," I said quietly. "You walk into a room, and everyone just bends." He smiled faintly, still reading. "I don't bend first." That was Kale. Simple. Sharp. Absolute. Days turned into a strange rhythm. We didn't talk much, but the silence between us wasn't awkward. It was heavy, charged, alive. He'd make sure I ate, that I rested, that I stopped ignoring my calls from my company. When I'd forget to take a break, he'd appear in the doorway and say, in that maddeningly calm tone, "Enough work. Come eat." It wasn't a request, but it wasn't a command I minded following, either. Sometimes, when we walked through his garden at dusk, he'd tell me stories. How he built a Revos from near bankruptcy after his father's death. How people underestimated him until he learned how to weaponize it. "I stopped explaining myself," he said once, as the sea wind brushed his hair back. "I stopped asking for approval. You'd be amazed how quickly the world listens once you stop trying to please it." His words lingered long after he went inside. Then came the dinner. It started with a text from my mother. "Your father wants to meet your husband. Tomorrow. At our home. Bring him." I stared at it for a long time. My first instinct was to refuse, but I knew them. If I didn't go, they'd show up at Kale's doorstep. That was a disaster waiting to happen. So, reluctantly, I told Kale. He didn't even look surprised. "I expected this," he said, tapping his tablet. 7 o'clock? "Yeah. Are you sure you want to?" He glanced at me, expression unreadable. "They're your family. Of course I'll meet them." The calmness in his tone didn't fool me. There was something dangerous in his eyes. Something that said if they hurt you, I'll end them. The next evening, we arrived at my parents' estate, a sprawling mansion of glass and pretense. My mother greeted us at the door, all pearls and smiles that didn't reach her eyes. "Kale Arden," she said sweetly. "So you're the one who swept my son into this little, surprise marriage." Kale inclined his head politely. "Mrs. Whitmore. It's an honor." Her smile tightened. "I'm sure it is." My father was already waiting in the dining room, arms crossed. "You've caused quite the stir, Mr. Arden. Marrying my son without so much as a word to the family. Very bold." Kale took his seat with quiet grace. I tend to be decisive. The tension crackled instantly. My parents had built their lives on appearances, control, hierarchy. And Kale, sitting across from them, an Omega who carried himself like a king, was everything they couldn't understand. Dinner began politely enough, but I could feel the knives beneath every word. "So, Kale," my father said, slicing into his steak, "tell me, how does an Omega end up running an empire like a Revos? Surely you have a strong alpha behind you somewhere." I froze. My stomach twisted. "Dad." Kale didn't even flinch. He looked up slowly, setting down his glass. "No," he he said evenly. Just a strong mind. My mother gave a soft laugh. Oh, of course. But you must understand, in our circles, it's unusual for an Omega to lead without guidance. Guidance, Kale repeated, voice silk over steel. Is that what you call dependence? Her smile faltered. I didn't mean. I know what you meant, Kale interrupted gently, eyes steady. You meant that Omegas belong under someone's protection. That power should always flow from alphas downward. He leaned forward slightly, the air around him sharpening. But tell me, Mrs. Whitmore, if that were true, why does your company's board quietly rely on Arrivo's investments to keep its stocks afloat? My father stiffened. What? Kale's smile was faint, almost kind. You didn't think I'd attend dinner without doing my homework, did you? The room went still. I know about the offshore debts, the frozen accounts in Zurich. And I know, Mr. Whitmore, that without the bridge loan Arrivo's approved last quarter, Whitmore Holdings would have defaulted by now. My father's face drained of color. How did you? Kale tilted his head slightly. I see everything that concerns what's mine. His gaze flicked briefly toward me. And your son is mine now, which means his well-being and reputation are no longer subject to your approval. The silence that followed was suffocating. Kale's tone never rose, but the weight of his words filled every corner of the room. If I ever hear either of you belittle him again, publicly or privately, I'll make sure the Whitmore name disappears quietly from every corporate registry within the month. Am I understood? My mother stared, lips trembling. You wouldn't. Kale smiled politely. I would, but I'd prefer not to. Then, with perfect calm, he picked up his glass and sipped his wine as though he hadn't just dismantled my parents' power in a few sentences. I couldn't breathe. I'd seen my parents manipulate people all my life. Bend them, guilt them, break them. But Kale broke their illusion of superiority without even raising his voice. Dinner ended soon after. My mother claimed she wasn't feeling well. My father avoided eye contact entirely. As we left, I muttered, You didn't have to do that. Kale glanced at me. They needed reminding. Reminding of what? He looked forward, eyes calm, voice quiet. That no one gets to humiliate you again. My chest tightened. Kale. He turned slightly, studying me. Did it bother you? I hesitated. No. It's just, no one's ever defended me like that. A faint smile ghosted over his lips. Then get used to it. That night, back at the mansion, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the dinner in my head. The precision, the poise, the power Kale wielded so effortlessly. He didn't scream. He didn't threaten like my father did when angry. He simply stated reality, and the world bent around it. And beneath all that strength, there was something deeply protective. He didn't humiliate them for sport. He did it because they'd hurt me. The thought made warmth bloom somewhere deep inside me. Foreign, confusing, addictive. Around midnight, I found him on the balcony, watching the sea. You're awake, he said without turning. Couldn't sleep, I admitted, stepping beside him. You really scared them. He smiled faintly. Good. Kale, you didn't have to. He faced me then, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. Jace, he said quietly. You think strength means being louder than everyone else. But true power, real control, comes from knowing exactly when to be silent. The wind caught his hair, and for a moment, he looked untouchable again. Then his hand came up, brushing my jaw, his touch unexpectedly gentle. I don't need you to be afraid of me, he said softly. Just don't run from me. I swallowed hard, heart hammering. I'm not running. His lips curved. Good. For a second, the air between us shifted. Something electric, something alive. Then he stepped back, as if giving me space was another form of protection. Sleep, he murmured. You'll need it. I turned to leave, but before I did, I glanced back at him. The Omega who ruled like a king and guarded me like a secret. Kale Arden. The man who didn't need to roar to command a room. The man who was teaching me, without even trying, what true strength really felt like. And as the waves crashed softly below, I realized something terrifyingly simple. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the alpha in control. But I'd never felt safer. The scandal broke 3 weeks after the dinner with my parents. At first, it was just murmurs online, blurry photos, suspicious timelines, exaggerated captions. Then, like wildfire, it spread everywhere. Was Kale Arden the reason for Jace Whitmore's broken engagement? Ex-fiancé Lance Rivers speaks. They were already seeing each other. Cheating scandal rocks high society. The first time I saw Lance's face on the screen, smiling that perfectly rehearsed smile, my stomach turned. He sat in some glossy studio, voice soft, wounded. I don't hate Jace, he said, eyes glistening just enough for the cameras. I just wish he'd been honest with me. I found out he was already involved with Mr. Arden before our engagement ended. That's why he rushed into marrying him. I guess I was just a placeholder. I felt like the air had been punched out of me. Lies, I whispered, staring at the screen. Every word. But people didn't care about the truth. They cared about drama. About how perfect the story sounded. The soft, trusting alpha, secretly seduced by the powerful Omega CEO. And because Kale was untouchable, the media tore into me. Alpha caught between lovers. Kale Arden's secret affair. Was Jace the homewrecker? Lance Rivers, betrayed but brave. I didn't even realize my phone was vibrating until Kale's name flashed across it. Don't read anything else, he said as soon as I answered. His voice was calm, too calm. I'm already handling it. Handling it. I croaked. Kale, this isn't something you can. I said, he repeated softly. I'm handling it. Before I could argue, the line went dead. By the next morning, chaos had become silence. Every major network that aired Lance's exclusive suddenly retracted their stories, citing legal complications. His interviews vanished from social media. His sponsors withdrew support. And then the bomb dropped. A news outlet released screenshots of Lance messaging journalists, offering payment for coverage. A voice recording surfaced, him bragging to a friend. If I can't win Jace back, I'll ruin him. It'll make great publicity anyway. His career imploded overnight. But the part that chilled me wasn't the scandal. It was how fast Kale had done it. He didn't yell. He didn't even mention it again. He just moved through the house that morning like he always did, composed, elegant, utterly in control. When I confronted him, he was standing by the window, sleeves rolled up, reviewing documents. You destroyed him, I said quietly. He didn't look up. No, he said. He destroyed himself. I simply accelerated the process. Kale, he's a liar, Kale finished, voice steady. Who tried to humiliate you. You think I'd let him live comfortably after that? I stepped closer. You didn't have to go that far. Now he did look at me, slowly, deliberately. His gaze locked onto mine, calm but dangerous. You think I protect halfway, Jace? The sound of my name on his lips made something in my chest stutter. This isn't about revenge, he continued softly. This is about respect. He disrespected what's mine. My pulse jumped. What's yours? He didn't blink. You. The word hit like a shock. My breath caught, heart skidding between fear and something I couldn't name. I wanted to argue, to tell him he wasn't allowed to claim me like that. But when he spoke again, anyone who hurts what's mine pays for it, he murmured. That's a promise. My knees almost gave out, because he said it not like a threat, but like a vow. Quiet. Absolute. That afternoon, I tried to go for a walk to clear my head, but the staff stopped me at the door. Mr. Arden's orders, sir. One of them said nervously. There's press outside. He asked that you not be seen until it's handled. I stood there, fists clenched, torn between frustration and disbelief. Kale had turned my life into a fortress. But the strangest part? I didn't feel trapped. I felt safe. Like the noise of the world couldn't touch me as long as he stood between me and it. Still, it scared me. How much I'd started to depend on him. A few nights later, we had dinner together, just the two of us. The lights were low, the sound of the city far below the balcony. I kept my eyes on my plate, my appetite long gone. Still thinking about him? Kale asked quietly, pouring himself a glass of wine. I hesitated. I hate that I look weak. You're not weak, he said immediately. You're human. I laughed bitterly. You don't make mistakes like I do. Kale leaned back, regarding me with that unreadable calm. You think strength means never falling? I think strength means not needing someone else to clean up your messes. He didn't reply right away. Instead, he reached over and placed his hand over mine. His skin was cool. Steady. Jace, he said softly. You don't have to prove your strength to me. I already see it. My throat tightened. It shouldn't have meant so much, but the praise, simple as it was, struck deep. The warmth of his approval made something inside me unfurl. A quiet ache that whispered this is what safety feels like. And for the first time, I understood something that terrified me. I wanted his praise. Needed it. It wasn't about power or dominance. It was about the way Kale saw me, really saw me. When he said I'd done well, the world felt lighter. When he looked disappointed, my chest hollowed out. I'd never been submissive in my life. But around Kale, maybe I was. Just a little. A week later, the media storm shifted again. Instead of scandal, they were calling it a revelation. The alpha protected by an omega. For the first time, it wasn't mockery. It was fascination. Admiration. Kale's power was changing the rules. He was redefining what strength looked like. No one dared insult me now. No one dared speak Lance's name again. I found myself watching Kale more often. How he carried himself in meetings. How people fell silent the moment he entered a room. Yet when he turned to me, that sharpness faded, replaced by something warm, intimate. He'd touch my wrist briefly, or guide me with a hand at the small of my back when cameras flashed. Subtle gestures, but they burned through me like fire. Every day, I discovered something new about him. Every day, I sank a little deeper into his gravity. That night, as he was finishing a call, I stood quietly by the window, looking out over the glittering city. When he hung up, he walked over, stopping behind me. "Are you still thinking about the articles?" I shook my head. "No, just about how everything changed so fast." His hand came up, tracing the back of my neck lightly. "Change isn't always bad." I turned slightly, catching his gaze. "You scare me sometimes." He smiled faintly. "Good. It means you understand what I am." I swallowed. "And what's that?" He leaned closer, his breath brushing my ear. "The one who keeps you safe." My pulse skipped. "And if I don't need protection?" "Then you'll still have it," he whispered. For a long moment, we just stood there, silence stretching between us, thick, electric. And I thought about how easily he could break people with a word. How he could make or ruin reputations with a glance. Yet when his hand moved to the back of my neck, slow and careful, he touched me like I was something rare. "Jace," he said softly, "look at me." I did. His eyes were steady, dark as midnight. "You've done enough running. Stay." It wasn't a command. It was an invitation, soft, absolute. And maybe that's when I finally understood what drew me to him. It wasn't his power, or the way he shielded me from the world. It was how, under all that dominance and control, he saw me. Not the broken alpha, not the scandal. Just me. And for the first time, I didn't want to resist that pull anymore. The world had stopped whispering. It was shouting now. Every news outlet, every gossip page, every corporate forum was talking about us. Erivo's corporation's silent, untouchable CEO had become the center of chaos again. And I was the reason why. At first, Kale handled it with his usual quiet precision. The same calm that terrified his competitors now comforted me. His words were measured, his movements deliberate. But beneath that smooth composure, I could feel it, his anger cold and focused, like a blade hidden under silk. And yet, even through the tension, he never once looked at me with blame. Only with something heavier. Something like love. It all came to a head when my parents demanded a meeting. They didn't come to talk. They came to negotiate. The dinner was never meant to be peaceful. From the moment I stepped into that glass-walled restaurant, I knew this wasn't a family talk. It was an ambush wrapped in crystal and candlelight. Kale sat beside me, calm as ever, while my parents faced us across the table like boardroom rivals. My father's expression was clipped and cold. "Jace, your marriage has caused unnecessary attention. The board is concerned. Investors are whispering. We've taken steps to file for annulment." I blinked. Annulment? My mother sighed delicately, as if this were a favor. "You were emotional, darling. After Lance. Everyone understands. But this marriage to Kale Arden, was impulsive." Her voice sharpened. "He's too powerful, Jace. You've tied yourself to a man who controls half the corporate world. You think he'll ever let you make a decision again?" My chest tightened. "He doesn't control me." "Doesn't he?" My father cut in, leaning forward. "Erivos could buy and sell our family 10 times over. He's an Omega who built an empire that even Alphas fear. And you," he shook his head. "You're walking straight into his shadow." Kale didn't move. He didn't even blink. But I could feel the air around him shift. Heavy, cold, deliberate. The waiter passing by took one look at him and turned away. Finally, Kale spoke, his voice a quiet, velvet blade. "You think I married your son to own him?" My mother straightened, wary. "I think men like you don't marry without an agenda." Kale smiled, slow, dangerous. "Then perhaps you don't understand what power looks like." "Excuse me," my father snapped. Kale leaned back slightly, every movement precise. "You measure power by control. By who bows first. But I don't need control over Jace." He turned to look at me, his gaze softening almost imperceptibly. "I just need him beside me." The table went silent. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "You talk like a romantic, Mr. Arden, but don't forget, you've already ruined his reputation. Our family's name. Kale's eyes flicked to her, sharp and quiet. Your name means nothing to me. Watch your tone, my father warned. Kale's voice dropped lower. No, you watch yours. You sit here and talk about names and money, while your son was humiliated in public, abandoned by the people who should have defended him. You want to lecture me about protection? He leaned forward slightly, tone deceptively calm. The difference between us, Mr. Whitmore, is that I don't discard what's mine when the world turns against him. I protect him. My father's face flushed, but he said nothing. Kale's words hung in the air like smoke. Impossible to ignore, impossible to counter. Then Kale reached under the table and took my hand, his touch grounding, his thumb brushing my knuckles once. You have two choices, he said softly, eyes never leaving my parents. You can accept your son's happiness, or you can stand against me. But if you stand against me, you'll lose. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact, calm, final, and terrifyingly real. My parents said nothing more that night. When we left, my mother's face was pale, my father's jaw tight. Kale walked me to the car, silent until we were alone. Then, gently, he said, You don't owe them anything, Jace. I know, I whispered. But it still hurts. Kale turned, cupping my jaw in his hand. I know, he murmured, thumb tracing my cheek. That's why I'll carry it for you, if you let me. The kiss he gave me then wasn't for show. It was quiet, aching, real. The kind of kiss that said I'm here, no matter what comes next. And in that moment, the noise of the city, the cameras, the judgment, it all faded, leaving only us. The world didn't end. The noise faded slowly, like a storm retreating beyond the horizon. Articles were replaced by new scandals, the gossip cycle moved on, and for once, silence didn't feel empty. Kale had handled everything with his usual precision. Meetings, statements, quiet pressure behind closed doors. No one dared question our marriage after that. And I didn't need to ask how he'd done it. I'd learned by now that Kale's way of fighting wasn't loud. It was absolute. Weeks passed before I realized what peace truly felt like. No more cameras. No more calls from my parents. Just quiet mornings, quiet dinners, and the kind of companionship that felt like exhaling after years of holding my breath. Tonight, the city stretched beneath us, glass towers reflecting a wash of amber lights. I found him where he always was at this hour. In his office, behind his desk, the glow of the skyline painting silver on his hair. He looked up when I entered, eyes softening in that way that was only for me. You should be asleep, he said. I could say the same to you, I murmured, crossing the room. He leaned back slightly, watching me approach with that quiet focus that made my pulse skip. Even now, I could feel the weight of him, not oppressive, but grounding. Kale didn't need to raise his voice or touch me to command attention. He just existed, and the world stilled for him. When I reached the desk, he reached for me, wordlessly guiding me into his lap, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. I settled there, my head resting against his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing beneath my cheek. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of the city outside filled the silence, soft and steady. Then Kale's hand moved, gentle, fingers tracing idle circles at the back of my neck. You've been quiet lately, he said. I've just been thinking, I murmured. About everything. I smiled faintly. About how I ended up here. About how strange it feels to be happy again. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was softer. You were never supposed to be unhappy. I was supposed to be useful, I corrected. That's how I was raised. To please, to behave, to keep the family's image clean. I looked up at him. You ruined that. His lips curved faintly. Ruined? I mean that as a compliment, I said, smiling. His hand came up, cupping my jaw. Good. Because I'd ruin 1,000 things if it meant keeping you. Something inside me ached, something warm, fragile, and overwhelming. I leaned into his touch, letting my eyes fall shut as he pressed a kiss to my forehead. It wasn't heated or desperate, just steady, a promise in motion. You know, I said quietly, sometimes I think I'm changing. That I'm not the same person who walked into that courthouse months ago. You are, he murmured. You're just freer. I exhaled softly, fingers brushing the edge of his collar. You make me want to be better, stronger. But sometimes I want to let you lead. Because it feels safe. Kale stilled for a second, then his thumb traced my lower lip. His gaze softened, something unguarded flickering there. You never have to ask for permission to rest with me, Jace. My chest tightened. That's not what I meant. I know, he said quietly. But I want you to remember it anyway. He leaned in then, closing the distance between us. The kiss was soft, unhurried, unclaimed. Just a whisper of breath, a slow meeting of warmth and trust. When we finally parted, the only sound was the quiet hum of the city. He brushed a strand of hair from my face, his expression gentler than I'd ever seen it. "You were looking for freedom," he said, voice low, steady, filled with something that felt like forever. "And you found me instead." I smiled against his shoulder, closing my eyes as his arms wrapped around me. "Maybe that's the same thing." He chuckled softly, lips pressing to the crown of my head. "Maybe it is." Outside, the city glittered. Two silhouettes framed against the skyline. Not Alpha and Omega, not power and submission, but two hearts beating in quiet harmony. And for the first time, I didn't feel like someone's heir, or scandal, or burden. I just felt his.